Change is upon us economically and socially. Fall is here, bringing a change of seasons for Earth and of mindset for mortals, said a wise man. I am Gerardo del Real, along with my co-host, the wise Fight the Fed, Nick Hodge. This is episode 88 of Bizarro World. We're going to talk gold. We're going to talk Breonna Taylor. We're going to talk the CDC and the Trumpster guy, Elon Musk and Tesla. But before we get to all that, Mr. Hodge, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, Gerardo. I'm glad somebody reads what I put out there. Sometimes I think it just goes into the ether.
The last Early Advantage article, I read them all, of course, because it's an excellent newsletter, was one of the better written ones, or one of the ones that appealed to me the most is a better way of describing that. And I thought there were multiple quotes in there that really stood out to me. And the other one was, and it seems the volume of things to call. Well, let me backtrack. It said, I've been calling it like I see it for some time now. And it seems the volume of things to call out has only grown in my tenure, while those willing to stand for something, anything, has diminished commensurately. You fancy word guy, you. You wanna expand on that, Mr. Hodge? What's on your mind, man?
Well, I just think it's Bizarro World is the reason that we do the podcast, and whether it's the vast wealth inequality or the two-tiered justice system that's emerged, or the lack of accountability, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. It just seems like there's no leadership, right? And we've talked about the dearth of leadership a little bit, but I'm talking about in the entire world and in the country. And it just seems like outside of the business world, we could talk about Mark Cuban a little later, coming up with some good ideas. But there's just, you know what it is. It's a fourth turning, and there hasn't been a lot of good ideas that have been thrown out there. And we're seemingly content to, kick the can, right? Down the road. And it seems like whether you want to talk about the nearly $3 trillion of dirty money that was going through banks, which is already out of the headlines because it's a known thing, right? And so there's no visceral reaction to it because it's like, yeah, of course the banks are laundering money for terrorists and drug cartels or whatever it is, right? Because it's nothing new. It's been going on for years. I can remember an HSBC story from 10 years ago where they were laundering money for terrorists. And so nothing new under the sun, and it seems like that there has to be something new under the sun to catalyze the next cycle forward, and that's the next cycle of economic vitality, and the next cycle of social vitality, which was in the first thing you said there about the change for
first thing you said there. You actually said it. Yeah. No, I think you're 100% correct. And, we're going to talk about Breonna Taylor and the grand jury decision in a bit and, the response again. But I think, I absolutely agree. We're at a point where all of our elected leaders, the powerful ones, are, in their mid-70s. Ron Paul is having strokes on air, all the best to him, obviously, and his family. It sounds like he's stable, but I think it's a sign just of, the aging ideas that just are not going to get us out of the cycle that we're in. We're going to need youth. We're going to need new ways of thinking. We're going to need new approaches. And you mentioned Mark Cuban. I'd love for you, because I read something similar to what you're referencing, I believe. I would love for you to kind of get into that before we talk gold and the markets and all of that. What stood out to you from his comments?
Well, I was specifically talking about the income, right? The $1,000 to every family is what caught my eye, which is something I think we know is coming. And I'm not sure if that's the right solution or not, but he's someone that's presented out of the box ideas, and someone that I think has his finger on the pulse more than others when it comes to, he's sort of like a Ray Dalio, or someone who I think at least, quote unquote, gets it, even though they have outsized wealth, right? And I was thinking about it in terms of stimulus, right? Because, and you can talk about the other things, but I just think there's a lot more stimulus on the way. And I think that's just the the new status quo, right, is the Fed is now in the markets permanently. The government is now going to have to be in the business of permanent stimulus. And maybe there is a place for UBI. He was saying $1,000 checks for all American households every couple of months. I don't know the exact terms he was saying, but
$1,000 every 2 weeks for the next 2 months.
There you go. And so I was thinking about gold because, the money printer goes burr, whether that's, from the Federal Reserve or from the government, right? And so that's just the era we're in. And I don't know how long it's going to last. I would submit that we're sort of on the fulcrum, right? And however long it takes to turn on this fulcrum is how long these ideas will be swirling around. And that's sort of like the window of time for this wealth transfer and this reset that we've been talking about. Because while that's a seemingly good solution now, and I'm honestly not even against it. I heard Andrew Yang talk about it a lot, and I've warmed up to the idea. And from a libertarian perspective, it makes some kind of sense, especially when you take into account the vast profits made when they don't internalize the cost, which we've been talking about in the past couple of episodes. And anyway, that window, I think, is the gold window. It's the wealth transfer window. It's what you and I have been talking about for a long time. I watched a video with Frank Giustra and Ross Beatty, which we can put a link to and should probably even talk about a bit in a minute. And they were the same exact ideas. I thought I was listening to an episode of Bizarro
Our podcast,
World where we were much older and wealthier.
Let's hope both of those come to pass, right? The older and the wealthier.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, look, this class of politicians, I've called it the bottom, right? Is doing everything in its power to make sure that gold goes up and that the disparity in incomes, the wealth inequality in this country and around the world continues. It's accelerating. That much is clear. The Democrats finally decided to come back from vacation and offer up a slimmer package that would appeal to Republicans. And by slimmer, they meant another $2.4 trillion, right? And so again, Mark Cuban's approach where you get $1,000 every 2 weeks for 2 months on a use it or lose it basis so that it's a direct stimulus into the economy, I thought was practical. Again, I've said before, if we're going to just print money out of thin air, then let's get it to the people. Let's get it to small businesses. Let's quit funneling it to the better connected, the people that can afford the lobbyist. And yeah, all of that, tying it all in, is extremely bullish for gold. So when we have a pullback like we did this week, we're sitting there at the 1862 level. Hold the door, right? It dropped a few percentage points. I think it's healthy. I think that a lot of people sold out of positions that they then came back in the last few days and bought up, and you can see that in the volume of some stocks. But it tells you how panicky even gold bulls are because of the trauma of the most recent bear market, which was absolutely brutal. It bodes well, I believe, for the sentiment that the generalists have not come in yet, right? We're a long ways from that. And so, using the baseball analogy again, it's early in the game. There's a whole heck of a lot of game left. And I think, again, if 1800 is the new floor, we're in for a fun couple of years. And obviously, there's going to be pullbacks. You should be using those to bolster positions because look, bottom line is Keith McCullough, a gentleman that you follow and I follow as well. He said it best. What are your other options? It's stocks, the major U.S. indices at 100 times earnings, bonds where the central banks are the bidder of last resort and soon will be the only bidders, and in many places already are. Or you switch it up and you go long commodities, right? And I think, when you look at gold, when you look at copper, when you look at the lack of infrastructure investment around the world, the amount that's needed, I think the next few years are going to be absolutely incredible from that aspect of it. And hopefully this group of politicians and this group of voters can find a way to just at the very least not make things any worse before, the new guard from both the right, the left, and the libertarians come in and hopefully we see a paradigm shift, right?
Well, 100%, and I think you're 4 or 5 years away from that, which we've talked about. Yeah, and I still think that I'm only now starting to see ads, for gold ETFs, and I follow a bunch of generalist newsletters that aggregate stories that I read in the morning, and gold is only now starting to pop up in them a little bit here and there. So still very early. And to Keith McCullough, I've mentioned him a couple of times on this podcast, and he was saying to sell gold last week, and I try not to get that granular. He makes exceedingly short-term moves based on what he calls whatever his macro lens and his ranges based on the quads that he thinks we're in, which I've been following for a while, and I think are quite accurate. I think he does a pretty good job, but I think he thought the dollar was going to weaken, and the dollar has been perplexing to me this week, because even as I'm looking at it now, it's above a 94.5 handle, right? And so
who would have thought?
Right? I know, exactly. There you go. And so I'm interested to see, because as you say, gold is glued to that 1863, man. I mean, it went down to, in the 1850s for a little bit, but then
didn't like it there. Right? Yeah, it didn't like it at all, right?
But it's glued right to that low 1860s level, and so I think it's just side eye in the dollar as well. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? And the dollar's like, what the fuck are you doing, right? And so I don't know. I'm interested to see what the fuck they're doing.
I've said it for 5 years, man. Gold, the overall U.S. indices, and the dollar will rise together when we reach new real all-time highs in the gold price. It has to happen that way, because again, and I hate to be cliche and keep saying the same thing over and over, the dollar is the cleanest dirty shirt. I said the last few months of the year and the first quarter of 2021, you shouldn't be surprised to see dollar strength. And I think that, again, the dollar rallying in the face of a slimmed down $2.4 trillion proposal on a budget that's already working off multi-trillion dollar deficits. I think it speaks to the quality of the other currencies, and we have a very domestic way of looking at things oftentimes, and we don't kind of step back and look at the entire forest. And the bottom line is, what do you want to pivot into the euro? I mean, do you want to pivot into the peso? Do you want to there's just not a lot of great choices. And so again, the more and more this continues to play out, the better gold looks. And man, if you can find a couple of juniors that know what they're doing and deliver, the leverage is just phenomenal, right?
Yeah, I would have to just mention Bitcoin as well, because it doesn't like that 10,000 level. And someone was asking me a couple of weeks ago on a live call I was doing for something that was cheap at a trade, and Bitcoin came to mind, and it's up $700 since then. And I haven't really charted Bitcoin all that much, but some people I follow on Twitter seem to think that it's narrowing into a place where it has to, break out or break down. And of course, the bulls think the former. And so just like gold is looking for direction at 1860, I think Bitcoin is looking to get back above 11,000, and sooner than later.
Agreed.
You talk about few options. That is an option.
Absolutely. No, and one worth mentioning, and I know that the Bitcoin space, the cryptocurrency space isn't the sexiest to be talking about right now, but it is absolutely an option. And to that point, the ECB started talking about introducing a digital euro, right? And again, they're scrambling behind the scenes. You can just, some of the stuff they're throwing up against the wall is amateur hour, except it's the central bankers that dictate monetary policy that are doing it. And so it's just be careful out there, everyone. Be careful. I'll say that. Let's talk copper a bit. It pulled back a bit, but still trading right around the $3 level. It's at $2.97 the last I looked. Copper gold plays hold off for a day or two. They came right back. Any thoughts on copper?
Strong for the same reasons that you mentioned about infrastructure. And let's take a step back. And actually, I want to turn the question back to you. You talk about rising dollar and rising gold, but it's been a weak dollar that's driven commodities for the past, 3 months. We've talked about lumber and we've talked about other things. Do you see Same thing, rising dollar, rising gold, rising copper. That's what you see?
I do, because Powell and his buddies are hell bent on making sure that savers continue to get punished and that things continue to rise. And by things I mean, tangible things like lumber, like crab cakes, like copper, housing. We have a historically red hot housing market here in the U.S. at a time where people can't go anywhere, where a lot of people still aren't working. Unemployment is near double digits, and again, we have, year on year housing prices that are double digit appreciation. It's madness, frankly. And it should be maddening for the people that are paying attention. Unless you're on the right side of it. And by the right side of it, we've said this over and over, it's the people with exposure to financial assets, real estate, all of that, commodities. And luckily you and I are positioned that way. But man, again, I really do feel for the people that have no idea what's going on and are trying to figure it out and can't figure out why childcare costs as much, if not more, as putting your kid through college. It's insanity, right? And there's thousands of examples like that where it's just becoming tougher and tougher to find upward mobility. Not the rule, but it is becoming tougher. I think everybody can see that.
Did you know that copper was the traditional gift for the 7th wedding anniversary?
The 7th? Is that right?
The 7th.
All right. My favorite number. I learned something. Every time I speak with you, Nick.
It's my wife and I's 7th wedding anniversary. And so that's the only reason I know that this week is because I was looking to see what how there's traditional gifts for every anniversary, like the first one is paper, et cetera. And that's where you get the thing like a diamond anniversary, right? Or a golden anniversary, because those are the traditional gifts for the higher levels of anniversaries. And in the lower numbers, the single digits, which we're still in, it's cheaper things like copper, for example. And so anyway, I don't know why I'm telling you that, but I got my wife a dish. She puts her rings like in a dish on the bathroom counter, and I got her a copper dish with our initials in it. So that's like a gold copper play, right? Because she'll have like the gold rings and the copper dish. I'm always doing it, Gerardo. I'm always doing
it. Well, congratulations to you and your wife. You got to do it. What are you going to do, Nick?
I'm just telling you about my gold copper play. I don't know. I'm taking her out to dinner tonight. That's what we're doing. I love it.
Let's keep it to the metals. Battery Day. Elon Musk. I don't really follow the stock all that much, but I do follow developments there because they're so far ahead when it comes to electric vehicles, and obviously they have, the company has the power to move markets, and it affects the price of lithium and the supply and the demand and nickel and cobalt and palladium and everything else that's tied to it. It was interesting to me that on Battery Day, I think the same day, if not within a day or two of each other, Governor Newsom in California decides that by 2035, I believe, gas vehicles will no longer be sold in the state. This isn't, a tiny state with 1 million people. It's fucking California. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
You remember a couple of months ago, we were starting to talk about the Robinhood traders, and I think I was talking about this kid who did a video, and he was talking about how to buy calls on on Tesla, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah. I think we put the link up.
Yeah, we put the link. That's right. And so this week after Battery Day, I saw somebody else tweet this video of this girl, and I could find it if I really search. So I'll find it. We can put a link up. It was like, Trader Girl or something on Twitter, and she was giving her analysis of Battery Day, boy. And let me tell you, this is we're in bubble territory as far as these.
You think?
EV stories are concerned. I mean, you saw Nicola, the short report. I don't even know what I'm talking about now. I'm just going to talk for a second about all this because the Nicola, you saw how much it was going up, and then a short report came out, and now it's taken a complete round trip, right? But just shit out of like a storybook, right? Like the car was going downhill in the promotional video. It wasn't even being propelled by like the electric battery component system.
It was just gravity. That was
right.
a great technological breakthrough. Was gravity.
I was telling somebody this week, well, they learned a bit about gravity. All right, that's. I mean, the stock has come back down now. And then you have this other one. I mean, there's an announcement seemingly every day, but there was this Scottish power group. I think that's what it was called. That is like a solar company. And they announced this week that they were going to make a foray into the EV market. Like, don't even have shit, right? Just like all these other ones. And the stock was up like over 3,000% in one single day, right? Anyway, back to Tesla. So this girl was telling us why Elon was going to do what he was going to do, and he was going to make these batteries and the lithium products in Germany. And I mean, she just knew it all, right? And I'll have to put a link up. But, you know, it's sort of, and it just reminded me of that kid who was doing the Robin Hood trading video. Like, that kid didn't know shit about calls, and this girl doesn't know shit about the lithium supply chain, right? And so, you know, and just like Elon said he was going to source you know, lithium from North America. And then, you know, Elon got a lesson on the lithium supply chain, right? And figured out he couldn't source it from the United States or whatever. And so, not that Elon's dumb. He's obviously a brilliant man, and he's done well to catalyze the entire global U.S. Or entire global auto market into, you know, making electric vehicles. But, you know, a mining engineer, he is not. And a mining developer, he is not. And so, anyway, I don't know if I've answered your question, but and as far as the California thing, I mean, yeah, I'm all for these initiatives. They always take longer than anticipated. I've talked about that a lot on this podcast. I've been seeing calls for, you know, we're going to be zero emission by whatever, and then it keeps going 5, 10, 15 years out. But the initiative is there. What I think when I see those headlines is like, well, that's awesome. It's just, you know, we got to buy more lithium and rare earth stocks and nickel stocks or whatever, because if you're transitioning away from gas, you're just transitioning toward battery metals, right? I mean, that's how I view that. And so last thing on the battery thing is, you know, I'm not exactly sure entirely what Elon said, but it sounds like he thinks he's going to manufacture some of these lithium components by himself, and I welcome the effort, because it's going to put a spotlight on things like that, which is, to me, where the true value is in this whole, you know, EV electrification movement thing, right?
Absolutely. Any names out there that seem like good speculations for people to go do some due diligence on and make their own mind up about whether or not it's suitable for their portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, the company you interviewed recently was Critical Elements Lithium, and one that, you know, I've been developing a relationship with and participated in a financing at 30 cents, and it's since moved up to about 38 or 39 or 40 cents here recently.
Why do you keep buying things that go up after?
That doesn't always work that way, for sure. And they didn't for a long time. And you know, I didn't know that Critical Elements was going to, but I like the asset, and I like the people that were involved, and so it's a Quebec, it's a hard rock lithium asset, spodumene, and it's at the permitting stage, really at the construction decision stage, trying to bring in a partner or figure out how they're gonna finance construction, waiting on a permit for the Quebec government that is imminent, and has done good to lay good relations with the Cree Nation, which is the indigenous people there. Is bringing them in on the development of the project. Has a gentleman that sold a lithium company for several $100 million. Stefan Haber running the thing as president, and so it checked a lot of boxes. And you know, I've looked at a lot of lithium deals. I've been involved in lithium deals as far back as 2015, 2016. And how'd
you do on that first deal, Nick?
That was sort of like the lithium bubble. We did good on a couple of lithium deals. We did good on Millennial Lithium, a couple of 100%, and we did even better on Lithium X, getting in at 15 cents while it was private, and then you know, making 14 or 1500% when it was bought out for over $2 by the Chinese. And so But
better than a double.
If we're comparing assets, though, Critical Element has a better asset than Lithium X had, right? And so, and it's in a better jurisdiction. It's in Canada, and so all those reasons, I think it's a good name. And what else? There's been a lot of headaches, right? If you look at other companies that have tried to build mines, and so I think we're getting a little bit past that. This doesn't have quite the CapEx, right? And so, I think it's a good name to take a look at.
I like it. Here's another one. Generation Mining. They have a huge palladium, and correctly, it could be called a palladium copper project, right? That also has some gold in there as a kicker, but very similar in the sense that it's an advanced stage project. It's got incredibly successful management, people that know how to develop and monetize assets. And I think I think if you want to diversify a bit and have some palladium and copper exposure, it's in Ontario. I think Generation Mining is an excellent name, and I'll throw one more out there.
And importantly, has backing from Sibanye, because don't forget this was a Stillwater asset before Sibanye and Stillwater combined, and they remain a large shareholder.
You got it. And that's a big deal. You're absolutely correct. So, that's a name that I would encourage everybody to look at. Another one is Leading Edge Materials. Leading Edge Materials is a company that I've followed for years. They have the large world-class rare earth asset, heavy rare earths, the Norra Shar asset in Sweden. And, that was permit challenged for a while. And to Leading Edge's credit, they kept it in good standing. They brought some people that are very well connected and known to the players in the region that are looking to establish an independent critical metal supply chain. And I think that the Norra Shar asset is significantly undervalued right now relative to Leading Edge Materials' market cap. And they have, some copper assets, uranium assets in Romania that they're working on securing that could be company makers in their own right. But the main event is absolutely Norra Shar. And there's a big push out of Europe and around the world, frankly, to establish these independent critical metal supply chains. So that's a lot of free names, everybody. Generation, Critical Elements, Lithium. You're getting your money's worth today.
I like it.
Let's talk the Trumpster. I don't know why. Well, I do know why this has got as much media attention as it has. I do understand why. And I'm talking about, of course, the fact that he says or refuses to say that he'll concede if defeated at the ballot box in November. And the reason I say I don't understand is because it has a relatively simple solution and outcome. If you lose and you don't concede peacefully, then it just won't be peaceful. Look, this is where we're at in society. I told everybody it was going to be a hot summer in the spring. It's been a hot summer. It's going to be a crazy fall and winter. That's just the bottom line. That's where we're at in America in 2020. If you don't concede and the numbers show you lost and you don't want to leave peacefully, then guess what? You'll leave not peacefully. There's only one solution, right, Nick? Am I wrong? Am I simplifying this way too much?
I mean, that's Occam's razor, the simplest solution, right? I just think that he's a shit talker, if you want my 2 cents. But that's the solution, peacefully or not peacefully. I like how Obama insulted him. You see, Obama was saying you just have to cut off the cable so he can't watch TV, and then he'll leave. That's funny to me. Hey, listen, you know what everybody is not talking about, and I'm starting to get the feeling I got in 2016 is we might not have to talk about him vacating or conceding because he might win.
He might. Let's talk about it. What do the betting odds say? I haven't looked lately.
I don't know either, but I can tell you right now while I blabber for a second is that, when I look at, I talked earlier about I read all these generalist newsletters in the morning. The betting odds are at 54.3% for Trump and 43.5% 54.3% for Biden and 43.5%.
I was going to say that's a heck of a swing. Yeah. Okay.
No. But when I look at like the polling or the poll of polls, or last week the New York Times unveiled, like their election like polling page where they have all these different scenarios for the Electoral College, and assemble all the polls. But they have all these asterisks, right? And so if you read what the asterisks say first,
as you should, that's where I start.
They all say that. Basically all this polling data is well and good, but if all this is off the same way it was off in 2016, then Trump wins. And that to me was like, this is what people aren't talking about, right? And then the other thing I start to think about, and I'm no political analyst and I don't have a model or anything like that. This is all gut blind squirrel feeling stuff, right? Is like, who the fuck wants to vote for Biden? Like, what's his core? What's his core message first of all, and then like, what's his core audience? Like, is there a band of like hardcore Biden folks out there like there was for Bernie or Yang for that matter? No, like who had Biden as their first choice, right? Like, you think he can
or Kamala as the second,
rally the masses to like come out there and vote for him? I'm certainly not like, oh yeah, let me go out there and vote for Biden. Like, I don't know. I just don't think he instills excitement in anybody, despite what they might say, when the phone rings from a pollster, right? And so I just don't. And when I look at Trump, he's got a fervent base. I mean, you can say a lot of things about the guy, but his base is united and excited and vocal and fervent. And you can't say any of those things about the Biden camp. And that to me is, it means a lot as far as the outcome is concerned.
He markets well. If there's one thing Trump does exceedingly well, is market and cater to his base without regard for, as he calls it, the other half of America, because he doesn't care. And at least he tells you he doesn't care. And you know what? His base loves it, because a lot of them don't care either. And so, no, it's going to be interesting. It's we're getting close, Nick. We're coming up on the end of September here.
You know what? Not to cut you off, Gerardo, but I actually saw something the other day that I wanted to ask you about, and this is a pretty good forum to do so. He has like a cadre of ardent Latino supporters. Trump does. I've been reading a couple of articles about it. What's your insight there?
I think, and I don't want to generalize.
Is that like the Cubano? Like,
yes, and that's what I was going to say. Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't want to generalize, but I was going to anyway, and saying that, look, I have a I wouldn't say a good friend. I would say an acquaintance, a good acquaintance. Gentleman, mid-50s Cuban guy, him and his wife, great couple, great group of people. We get along well. We used to hang out, go for drinks, do the usual. And they're very pro-Trump, and they have their reasons. And they're your very stereotypical Cuban couple, in the sense that they came to this country from Cuba very young, getting away from the Castro administration. They moved to Miami. They became very successful. He was a corporate attorney. And they got ahead, and they really have a lot of respect and support for Trump saying the things that he says when he says them, for whatever reason. I don't know what the motivation is, other than I understand the wanting of small government. If you come from a place, because I want small government as well, right? If you come from a place where the government is so corrupt and abusive, and you land in a place like America, and you're able to really live out the American dream, as my family has, my disagreement there is a policy one. I don't believe that the Trump administration, or the Biden administration for that matter, are for small government. Everything that I see. I mean,
we were talking about the hysterectomies last week, for crying out loud. That's the biggest government you can get.
Correct. And that brings me back to my point of Trump markets well. I don't know why he resonates as much as he does with a certain voting block of the Hispanic community, but he does. but he does, you know. And so, like you said, it speaks to his ability to message and brand. And
I'm wondering if it's almost. I'm just wondering if it's almost something bigger. Like it's happened with the Italians as well. Like, like my grandfather voted for like Kennedy, but then voted for Reagan, right? And so I'm wondering, in the context of like generational turnings and the 20-year cycles that are inside of that, I'm wondering if there's just something bigger going on with that, sort of like what I just explained with going from Kennedy to Reagan. And you mentioned the American dream specifically. You just mentioned that. I'm wondering if it's like they think Trump embodies that more, and so it resonates more. And then last thing I'll say is, I told you a couple of weeks ago I was rereading The Fourth Turning, and I almost think we need Trump to get to the next thing, right? To like
the final nail in the coffin before the cycle turns.
Because it has to be a dead of winter, man. It has to be either like we've talked about it, an all-out war, or like in history it would be like the death of a king, or the death of a big family member that was a powerful house, or something cataclysmic. And Trump is just more cataclysmic than Biden for me.
Agreed. And I'll say this, and I said this, a year or two ago, and I said it in the beginning of the summer.
It's almost like a fulfilling of prophecy or destiny. Anyway,
it is, and the part that I hope isn't true, because I don't wish death on Mr. Trump. I disagree with many of his policies, and I think his personal character is shit, frankly. But I don't wish him harm or anything of that sort. I go through history and I read about when Kennedy was assassinated, and when it comes to talking points, a lot of the same grievances that Kennedy had, Trump has been unafraid to vocalize. He spoke out against the military, saying, I don't believe, the soldiers love me. I don't think the generals love me because they just want to go to war. I agree with that statement. I think he's right about that. Not that he's doing anything about it, but I think he's right about that. That's dangerous to publicly be doing that. This is also the same president that has talked down his Secret Service. That's dangerous. The same president that's talked down his FBI. Dangerous. And so, these are a lot of the things that Kennedy was doing. And it didn't end well. And I hope that's not the case this go around. But you mentioned fourth turnings and how, the final act tends to be, before the turning, tends to be one of on an epic scale. And we're going to see, him winning is definitely a possibility. And then I think it'll get, even more interesting.
That's what I mean. That's what we need. As bad as it sounds, like that's like you talk about like a final purging in the junior mining space or whatever, right? You need like a final purging in the political space where it hits rock bottom, because either that happens under Biden, which I just said I think is less likely. Biden, I think, is less cataclysmic. Or B, Biden is the savior. And so I don't believe that either. And so I just tend to think it's more the former, that Trump's second term is ultimate bottom versus Biden is the start of a new beginning. Does that make sense?
It does. And here's an interesting third option as you're talking. I'm thinking it, let's say Biden is announced as the winner and Trump does not concede power peacefully. And so it happens the only other way, but it's the military that turns on him, or, his party, which faced with, oh shit.
Well, that's how Aaron Sorkin would write it.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. That is exactly how Aaron Sorkin would write it. And then in the midst of that, we have social upheaval centered around people that truly do believe he was cheated. And this is why that language is dangerous, right? Because ultimately he'll be in the bunker, tweeting, watching Fox News, looking at pictures of, Stormy Daniels. He's not going to be on the front lines shooting and throwing punches with you. But everyday Americans will. We've seen this all summer. I want to talk Breonna Taylor in a bit, but, we've seen what language triggers, pun intended, in America, and it's increasingly becoming more violent. And that scenario worries me for the average everyday American, Joe the plumber, that's just wanting to work hard, wanting to get ahead, wanting some upward mobility, and really believing what this guy says. Because I don't think even he believes it most of the time. He'll win at all costs. And that is what it is. Even if he loses, he'll want to win. And so, again, it's just be careful out there, everyone. The election is soon. It's sad that in 2020 we're worried about the violence centered around an election, right? We're not sitting here worried about the policy. We're not worried about the fact that we still haven't had any immigration reform, any healthcare reform. He's promising $200 in gift cards, to everybody that he hasn't budgeted for. I mean, it's just magical fairy tale stuff that's going on. Biden comes out every 6 days. He has somebody tweeting for him. We're hoping he's lucid and has some policy proposals. And he's, to his credit, he's actually put forth, the policy proposal that can help beat him, right? He's telling people he's going to raise their taxes. Now, I agree that eventually we got to pay for things and that our deficit is out of control. I don't think you address that in the first 2 years if you are the incoming president. I think the smart strategy would have been to say, look, until we're back in, society the way that we used to be pre-COVID, there will be a freeze on all tax raises. It's not going to happen. We want businesses to get back to doing what they were doing, people to get back to their workplace, and then we can have a conversation in 2 years about raising taxes and paying for this disastrous economic policy of the past several administrations. But it's gotten out of hand under Trump. Be absolutely clear about that. This was pre-COVID. So, that's not the route he's going. He's saying, no, I'm going to raise taxes. I'm going to make the capital gains tax, go from, nearly double. Right. And so
starting at a fairly, not $1 million threshold, like several 100,000 threshold.
Correct. And so again, it's like another shot at people's ability to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, as the Republicans like to say. It's like from both sides. It's just you're getting cut off at the knees, man, with the policy that both administrations are going to pursue. So again, regardless of the outcome, I do see volatility. There's a debate next week. That'll be interesting. I can't wait. I'll actually watch it. The last time I tried watching something politically related, I had to watch the Trump town hall, and that was a disaster, right? And halfway through that, I was like, all right, I've had enough of this. I can't wait to see what it looks like when Biden's on the stage or, when Biden's on the Zoom call. It's going to be interesting.
He's really got to stand up to him, Biden, if he has any shot at all.
Agreed.
And so, I think everyone's watching this. The 29th, I think it is. One note on the violence is you said it was going to be a hot summer, and certainly it's been a lot of protests, a lot of murders in big cities. And two things. One, this sort of happens every election cycle. With a Democrat threatening is, they're going to take your guns, and the price of guns goes up a little bit, and there's a little bit of a run or whatever. But this year it's a little bit different, I think, for a couple of reasons. And one is this, I bought a couple of boxes of ammo a couple of months ago to sight in my rifle for this coming hunting season. And because I got a new scope. Anyway, it's a long story. I had to test a couple of types of ammo, right? So I did that a couple of weekends ago. I figured out which ammo my gun liked the best and sighted in my rifle. So I went back to the same website to buy more of that ammo that I determined was the one that was good for my gun. And it wasn't on the website anymore. You couldn't buy that same kind. And when I did find it on another website, it was up more than it had increased in price by $5 per box. And this is in a span of just 2 months. And that's just an anecdote, of course, but the scarcity and the price for ammunition is both rising. And I think that speaks to the demand, which is what you were talking about earlier. But more sinister is, and I don't know if this has to do more with COVID or the political situation or not, but other type of gear, I was buying a a backpack, like a frame backpack, in case I had to haul a deer out of this hunt I was going to go on. You quarter up the animal and you can like strap it to the frame. But these are also packs that like military guys use. Like some of the brands are crossover that make them, like Kifaru, for example. Some guys will take Kifaru packs and they'll take them to Afghanistan or on their deployment to Iraq because they're similar to like the rucksacks that are issued and you're allowed to use your own brand or whatever. You can't get these backpacks. Like people are like buying them like they're preparing for something. Like the one company I was looking at was like 6 weeks out on like the frames. And so it's just weird. And I know that people are camping more and doing more outdoor things. It just, I don't know, it's just weird.
Yeah, no, look, my wife was handgun shopping, several months ago. And I mean, I kid you not, Nick, it was, every store she went to, they were just completely wiped out. And it was like, well, you could order something and it'll be here in a month.
It's crazy.
And again, my wife isn't, a huge gun enthusiast for self-defense purposes, obviously, but even she was just amazed at the fact that she goes, I've been to 6 different places and none of them have what I'm looking for. And so, yeah, no, it's a coiled spring and not in the good way. And I'll just ask that everybody try to, whatever your political beliefs are, be civil, be kind to each other, make your country better, make your community better. You don't have to agree to do those things. I'm here just outside of Austin, Texas, and in Round Rock. Round Rock tends to lean more conservative than Austin. And, you got your Biden groups and you have your Trump groups and all of that. That's fine. Believe in what you want to believe in. But, you can do good and represent your community and your country and your family and disagree completely with the other side of it and not be violent. But we'll see. It's going to be what it's going to be. We have to talk, Breonna Taylor really quick. I'd love to hear your thoughts. For those of you not familiar, Breonna Taylor was a young Black woman in Louisville, Kentucky, who was sleeping at midnight with her boyfriend. The police were executing what's called a no-knock warrant at midnight. They were looking for an ex-boyfriend of Breonna Taylor, who not only no longer lived there, but was in custody. They didn't knock. They kicked the door down. They run inside yelling. The boyfriend of Breonna Taylor hears his door being kicked down, hears men rushing inside yelling, and fires off a shot that allegedly struck one of the officers. The officers react by shooting dozens, and I'm not talking 1 or 2, I'm talking 3 or 4 dozens of bullets back in the direction of supposedly Mr. Walker. Breonna Taylor ends up dead. And this week, the grand jury in Kentucky decided that the only thing the officer whose bullets killed Breonna Taylor did wrong was shooting into the white neighbor's house with wanton disregard. And so he was the only person indicted, and he wasn't even indicted for shooting Miss Taylor. He was indicted for shooting, bullets into the white neighbor's house.
I have to double check, but I don't even think it was the officer that killed Breonna Taylor that was indicted. I think it was another officer that was indicted for wanton endangerment whose bullets went into another apartment. Not even the gentleman who killed her. And so it's a perfect, it's clearly not perfect. But
it's a perfect fuck you of where America is with justice, right? That's what
exactly. It goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. Nobody stands for something, let alone anything. This is, I saw a lot of articles going around this week about, what wanton endangerment is. And, I know exactly what wanton endangerment is. It's a cop out, right? It's a lack of accountability. It's unwillingness to stand up for anything that's patently obvious to anyone who takes a second to consider it thoughtfully, right? And yeah, I'm not a legal expert, but it's not.
But you have common sense.
Exactly. It's not hard to see that something is wrong there and someone needs to be held accountable. It's like we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. where we learned that Edward Snowden was vindicated and laws were broken. But no one's going to be held accountable for that. We know something was wrong, but there's no justice, right? And what have they been saying in the streets for months? No justice, no peace. And, that's exactly where we are. And not just justice with the cops, although this is a perfect example of it, but justice with those banks that are laundering the money for the terrorists, right? That we so vehemently want to defend America against, right? Well, why don't you fucking penalize the banks who are laundering their money, right? It's like obvious stuff. And again, that's what a turning is. More and more people starting to see it and stand for something, stand against it, right? And so I don't know. That's just how it's just how I see it.
Agreed. And a couple of points. I mentioned the fact that the only officer was charged for discharging his weapon and shooting bullets into a white neighbor's home. That was the only person charged. I don't mention it because it's all about race. It's not. Daniel Cameron, who is the Kentucky Attorney General, is black. He is the gentleman that's enabled this grand jury and this investigation to go in the direction it went. Be absolutely clear, everybody. It's about power, right? And again,
same thing in Rochester. The gentleman was black in Rochester.
Thing. Absolutely. It's just
the gentleman who tased the white lady this week for not wearing her mask. I don't know if you saw that video. That cop was black.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I also saw a white officer run over a white guy with his bike. Literally, guy, the protester sitting on the floor, incapacitated, face down, and an officer runs his head over. White on white. So it's not about race. It's about power. It's about oppression. It's about skewing things to where, yes, Americans lose everyday rights because of the war on terror, supposedly. And meanwhile, we can't arrest one banker for funneling funds of cartels and terrorist organizations. Not one arrest. It has to happen the way it's happening, or it doesn't have to happen the way it's happening. But because it's happening this way, coiled spring, it's going to be more volatile. And again, real world implications for the markets. It's a pivotal time in this country and globally. And I think you're absolutely right, Nick. I think we have, several more years of this. I don't think this ends after the election.
I'm with you. 2027, 2028 ish. It's going to be very interesting. I hope to talk about it with you every week.
Rest in peace to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG. Whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, if you care about politics or not, what an incredible person, right? Just the amount of groundbreaking achievements and milestones and trend setting and opening of doors for future generations on all sides, whether you're on the right or the left, male, but especially female. Just a tremendous human being. I was saddened to hear of her passing. Had to mention that. Before we go, Nick, I have to ask you about ImmunoPrecise, man. I looked at the chart again, and what was your entry point on that when you recommended it?
Oh, gosh, Gerardo. I'd have to go and look, which I can do for you right now. But we're up, I think, 220%. So what does that make it? 75 cents-ish, something like that?
Yeah. So let's, that's my feel-good story to end the podcast on, because they're doing some important work that might help us get to the other side of this COVID pandemic / government imposed lockdown / government imposed crippling of our economy / I could continue on. But anyhow, do you want to explain to the people what they're working on and what this little company has been able to pull off? Because it's impressive for a small company.
I mean, if I can try, I got to read all the press releases 10 times because I'm dumb, Gerardo. And these press releases are pretty dense. But, they have advanced platforms that they can use to synthesize and test different antibody formulations by the millions, and they generate them from different animals. I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, from mice and rats and rabbits and llamas. And they've been doing this for a while, and then they can humanize those antibodies. So the way I always explain it to myself and others, and it's very rudimentary, and I'm not a doctor, is the disease or the target is a lock, and the antibody is a key, and you got to cycle through as many keys or antibodies as you can until you find one that fits in the lock. And then you can, if you get one that fits in a very important lock, like rheumatoid arthritis, for example, then you can make like Humira, which is the most profitable drug in existence, and that's an antibody drug, an antibody-based drug. And so I'm making it a long story, but immediately when COVID-19 came out, ImmunoPrecise started directing this platform toward finding a lock, an antibody for the coronavirus, finding a key, an antibody key to the coronavirus lock. And early on, they were successful in finding several antibodies that showed early promise in vitro in the lab of neutralizing the spike protein. That's the longest little spike on the molecule of coronavirus that you always see. So it can't transmit the disease. And very quickly, they've acted to test that more and to find an adjuvant. You'll remember what an adjuvant is, Gerardo, from stellar biotechnology days. And so they found an adjuvant that stimulates or can stimulate the immunoresponse in anticipation of delivering the key. So sort of like a quick 1-2, right? And without getting any more technical, they've advanced to a place where they're starting to produce these to do preclinical studies or trials. And, I've said for a while, they weren't mincing words. I was said a couple of months ago, it sounded to me like they were scientifically bragging. And this week they said, and I don't want to get the quote wrong, so let me see exactly what it was, but they think that the way that they're analyzing these antibodies, and here's how the quote starts, will help advance. No, that's not it. Sorry. Where is it? Characters will advance. Yeah, it will help advance our aim of bringing a safe and efficacious products to the clinic. And they think it will, quote, have a significant impact toward a successful single low-dose vaccine against SARS-CoV-2. And so that's like not mincing words, right? They're saying we're going to have a significant impact on finding a vaccine. And I know there's a lot of vaccines in various stages of trials, but you and I have discussed the problems with rushing a vaccine and the distribution of a vaccine. And I don't know if ImmunoPrecise is going to do it or not, but the chart has been fantastic, and readers of mine are up nearly 250% at this point. And it's one of those things where now it's breaking out. It's above 52-week highs. So it's going to depend on the news and the results of these trials, but the market's excited about it. Sounds like some happy readers out there. Hope so. I like it. Nick, anything else? No, that's it. I appreciate it. We're getting long in the tooth. Little bit. Everybody be nice, be kind, wash your hands. Be civil, be human. That's all we got this week. I'm Gerardo Del Real, along with Mr. Fight the Fed, Nick Hodge. This was episode 88, Nick. 88 of Bizarro World. Have a good week, everybody.